All right, greetings everyone. We're ready to go. Okay. Friends, today I want to talk to you about cell phone fees and internet costs. We are paying some of the highest costs in the country, in the world, in our country. And it is because Mr. Trudeau and conservatives before him have allowed the big telecom companies to exploit us. There's really no other way to put it. We pay some of the highest fees in the world for our cell fees, for internet access, extremely expensive. And Mr. Trudeau promised a couple years ago that he would bring down those costs. He promised to lower the cost by $1,000 a year for families. 2 years later, they have not gone down. And so, one, he owes families $2,000 that he promised that he would lower the cost by. And more importantly, moving forward, they're going to continue to remain high. And so we want to say really clearly, Mr. Trudeau has taken the side of big telecom. He has taken the side of allowing them to continue to exploit you and your families. And we're saying, let's stop that. There are ways that we can stop that. Both the Conservatives and Liberals have cost you. Their broken promises on lowering the cost of cell phones have cost you. And they will continue to cost you. Voting for Mr. Trudeau is going to cost you. It's going to mean that he's going to continue to not take on the big telecom companies, allow them to exploit you. And we're standing in front of Rogers. There's a Rogers-Shaw merger in the talks. We think that's going to make things even worse. It's going to be even more of a monopoly. And so we're proposing some solutions. A couple of things we can do right off the top. We can put in place a cap on how much these companies can charge you. This has been done in the States. It's been done in Australia. We want to put a cap in place that limits how much they can charge you. On top of that, we want to mandate mandatory unlimited data plans, not these fake plans which they call unlimited, but as soon as you get to a certain limit of data, they slow you down to the point that it's not like you even have access to data. We want to stop that. We also want to make sure that Canadians have low-cost options. And right now, that means breaking the monopoly. Mr. Trudeau talked about doing it and then ended up not doing it, which costs you. We want this to be really clear to Canadians. Every time Mr. Trudeau makes these promises and doesn't follow through on them, it costs you. And when it comes to big telecom, he has cost you and your families. We are paying the highest rates in the world, and it does not have to be this way. So our plan would save families money. We would take on the big telecom. We'd make sure you and your families had access to affordable cell phone and internet fees. And we know that in this pandemic, if nothing else, one of the things it's taught us is that it's extremely expensive and it's extremely necessary for people to work at home, for people to access services, for people to access education. People need access and it costs so much. So let's bring down the cost for families. That's what we're proposing today. Donc aujourd'hui, on va parler de comment M. Trudeau et les conservateurs en avance ont laissé les grandes compagnies de télécommunications d'exploiter les gens. Et la réalité, c'est qu'on paie les prix les plus élevés, un des plus élevés, à travers le monde à ce moment. Et c'est directement le résultat des décisions prises par M. Trudeau et les anciens gouvernements conservateurs et libéraux. Et on sait qu'on peut changer ça. Notre plan, c'est de faire face à ces compagnies en mettant en place des projets de loi et des limites pour réduire les coûts pour les familles. Et je veux encore vous rappeler, quand M. Trudeau brise ses promesses, le résultat, c'est vous payez le prix. Vous payez le prix. Donc notre plan, c'est de mettre une limite sur le montant que les compagnies de télécommunications peuvent charger. On veut aussi s'assurer qu'on a un plan pas limité pour accès au Internet. Et on veut aussi s'assurer qu'il y a des options de moins coûts, moins chers pour les familles. On peut réduire les coûts pour les familles. C'est quelque chose que c'est complètement fiable, mais on doit avoir le courage de faire face aux compagnies de télécommunications, pas comme M. Trudeau et les conservateurs qui ont laissé ces compagnies de vous exploiter. On va arrêter ça. Once again, thanks so much. I just want to point one last thing out. This is an election where you've got a choice, and the choice is really important. Mr. Trudeau and Mr. O'Toole are fighting over who's worse. I can answer that question for them. They're both pretty bad. We have an alternative way to move forward, where it's going to lift you up, support you and your families, take on the super wealthy, make sure they start paying their fair share. Mr. Trudeau said that you can't tax the super wealthy with unlimited zeal. We are absolutely going to have maximum zeal in making sure you and your families are put first, maximum zeal in making sure that telecom companies don't exploit you, maximum zeal to make sure that the super wealthy do pay their fair share. We believe it's possible, and we're going to get it done. Merci. I'm ready for any questions from the media now. Merci. Je suis prêt pour vos questions.
First question, we have Robin Gill, Global News.
I have two questions. First question, yesterday Justin Trudeau was heckled by a protester / voter, if you want to call it that, and he suggested that that person go protest at a hospital. Didn't he have anything better to do? Is he egging on these people, for one, and isn't it par for the course that you're going to be heckled when you are on a political campaign?
Absolutely. I mean, being heckled is not a big deal. That's life, that happens. But what is not allowed, what is completely wrong, is for anyone to impede the work of a healthcare worker, to stop them from going in to save lives, from stop the patients that need to go in to get care. That is just not on. There's absolutely no place for that. There is no place for anyone to in any way limit the access for a healthcare worker to go to a hospital, to go provide care. That is not on, and he shouldn't have been joking about that, because it is dangerous, and it's really causing problems for lots of people. We know that our healthcare workers are burnt out. They've gone through a really difficult time. It's not something to joke about.
And with respect to your announcement today, isn't it more realistic to open up this country to competition, to lower fees, as opposed to tackling a monopoly, which is what we are in Canada?
Yeah, what we're proposing is a couple of things. One is that limit on the cost. We would we put a price cap in place on the average of OECD countries. And this price cap idea is something that Australia and the United States have done, and it brought down the cost of cell phone and internet fees pretty significantly. So it's been done by other countries, putting in that price cap, but we also do want to ensure that there are low-cost options for Canadians. And one of the ways to do that is changing a ruling by the CRTC, which would allow low-cost options to use the existing infrastructure so they can actually compete. That's very fundamental. It's something that I absolutely believe in. But I also believe that alone is not enough. We also have to put in the price cap. We also have to mandate that there are unlimited plans that are truly unlimited. These are steps that we can take that would protect people, that would lower their costs, and would take on the big telecom companies.
Next question, Karina Roman, CBC News.
You said the other day that you struggle to think of anything that you could support in the Conservative platform, but they have money for affordable housing. They're talking about a 2-year foreign property owner ban, money for healthcare, lots of money for healthcare. So are you saying if there was a Conservative minority government, you wouldn't vote for these measures?
I'm letting Canadians know what I believe in and what I'm fighting for. And I want Canadians to know that so they can make an informed decision around where they vote in this election. But I also want Canadians to know they can't afford another 4 more years of Mr. Trudeau, because he has broken promises and commitments, and that costs you and your families. When Mr. Trudeau says he's going to do something and doesn't do it, there's a cost to that. When he promises to bring in pharmacare to the families that I met who need their medication covered, it costs them money. When Mr. Trudeau promises to bring in childcare and waits 6 years since being in office, every year for a family that costs $20,000 to get childcare, that's $120,000 of broken promises, because they still don't have access to childcare. So there's real cost to it. Mr. O'Toole will also cost families. So I'm saying the best way for Canadians to realize someone who's going to actually fight the climate crisis, who's going to fight the housing crisis, who's going to take on these big telecom companies, is voting New Democrat. That is the best way to achieve those things.
In terms of your costed platform, the Institute for Fiscal Studies and Democracy assessed the 3 main national party platforms. They're costing. They gave your platform the lowest score of the 3 in terms of overall score, although everyone passed. The part that you failed on was transparency. They said you only got 2 of your spending initiatives costed by the PBO. You got a lot of your revenue, but not your spending initiatives costed. Said you underestimate provincial jurisdiction battles that you would be facing with some of your promises. So what do you say to these criticisms, and what do you say to voters who say, well, if these criticisms are true, then how can they trust this plan?
It sounds like our plan is bold, and we're trying to do things that haven't been done before. And we are bold, and we are trying to do things that haven't been done before. Mr. Trudeau and the Conservatives want you to believe that it's not possible to achieve things by working with provinces. And if we had that mindset, we would have never had the universal health care that we have right now. If people said, oh, we are limited by federal jurisdiction to dream of a better world, then we would not have something that Canadians believe is one of the hallmarks of being Canadian. One of the things that we're most proud of is the fact that you can go into a hospital, you can go into a doctor if your leg is broken, if you've got a serious illness, and you can get the care that you need. And more importantly, your loved one can get the care they need. That was something we achieved because we said, you know what? There is something better that we can have here. It shouldn't be that your bank account or how much you earn determines what care you get. No one should have to be turned away from a hospital or turned away from the care that they need because they don't earn enough money. That's what we were able to achieve because the federal government said, Tommy Douglas said, let's dream of a world where healthcare is not something that's a barrier or not something limited to just the super rich. It's something that's available to everyone. We were able to achieve that. So our plan is to say, let's get pharmacare. Let's expand to have pharmacare so your medication coverage is included in our healthcare system. Let's make sure that we expand our healthcare system to include dental care. Yeah, we want to do that. And we're the only party that's talking about a credible plan to tax the super wealthy, the billionaires, the 44 richest Canadians that allowed that in this pandemic, we're able to earn $78 billion more. Let's make sure that they are able to start paying their fair share like Canadians do, like everyday folks do. And we are the only ones with that plan that's not going to put the burden on you and your families, that's not going to put the burden on not cut the help that you already need. We are going to be investing in you, but making sure that the billionaires and millionaires that use offshore tax havens and use loopholes that exploit the system, we're going to say stop exploiting it and pay your fair share.
Next question, Annie Bergeron-Oliver, CTV News.
Hi, Mr. Singh. You said that you're running to be Prime Minister, but you're currently in a distant third, hovering around just 18%. And it looks like, unless something major happens, that Canada is heading into another minority government situation. So I'm wondering, are you willing to prop up the Liberals or the Conservatives in order to avoid Canada going back into an election during this pandemic in the next few months?
I want Canadians to know when you vote for a New Democrat, what are you going to get? You're going to get someone who's going to fight for you. And our goal is to get the help that you need. And we've shown that in this pandemic. We fought to get more help for people. We were an opposition party that was able to achieve some of the most historic victories for people. We were able to double the CERB. We were able to increase the wage subsidy from the Liberals 10% to 75%. We were able to bring in paid sick leave for the first time at the federal level, where hundreds of thousands of Canadians were able to use it. We were also able to make sure that young people got help. So this is what we were able to achieve. What we're going to do moving forward is the exact same thing. Fight to get more help for people. Fight to make sure that people have the supports they need. That's what Canadians can expect from us. They can expect from us someone who's going to stand up for them and fight for them. And we're not looking to plunge the country into elections. We are looking to get results. And that's what Canadians should know.
And sort of to follow up on that, your party is on track to make some significant gains. So if you and the NDP are a kingmaker of sorts and do hold the balance of power, what specific measures do you need to see in a throne speech or in a budget in order to pass that?
First and foremost, one of the most important things for us is who's going to pay for this pandemic. And so really our measures around closing the loopholes, ending offshore tax havens, making the multimillionaires and billionaires pay their fair share, making sure we have web giants like Amazon that actually contribute fairly. While they make profits here, they pay virtually no taxes here. So we're going to make sure that they pay their fair share. That's one of the most important things we can do to take the burden off of families, to take the burden off of you, to take the burden off of workers. We want to make sure it's those at the very, very top that are starting to pay their fair share for once. And we contribute that towards the problems. And the things that we want to solve, we want to invest in healthcare. We want to tackle the climate crisis and create good jobs. We want to make sure that housing is more affordable. We want to make sure that people can actually find a home that's in their budget. Those are some of the things that are really important.
En français, s'il te plaît.
Donc, premièrement, ce que je veux faire, ce qui est essentiel pour nous, pour aller de l'avant, c'est de s'assurer que ce n'est pas vous ou votre famille qui paye le prix. Ce qu'on veut faire, c'est de s'assurer que c'est les ultra riches qui payent le juste part. C'est que les milliardaires payent le juste part. Donc, notre plan, c'est de s'assurer que c'est eux qui payent le juste part pour investir dans les gens, pour investir dans les soins de santé, pour investir, pour faire face à la crise du logement. Donc, ça, c'est notre priorité. Faire payer le juste part des ultra-riches pour investir dans vos familles, pour améliorer votre vie. Et c'est ce qu'on va faire.
Prochaine question, Jean-Sébastien Cloutier, Radio-Canada.
Oui, Monsieur Singh, Yves-François Blanchet est en Acadie aujourd'hui pour discuter politique avec les Franco-Canadiens. Il n'y a pas beaucoup été question des Franco-Canadiens à l'extérieur du Québec pendant cette campagne. Au débat, on n'en a pratiquement pas parlé. Il n'y a pas eu de questions dans le débat en anglais. Trouvez-vous ça normal qu'on ne parle pas beaucoup des Franco-Canadiens et vous proposez quoi?
Je pense que c'est tellement important qu'on parle des Franco-Canadiens et on a proposé quelque chose pour les aider. Premièrement, il faut souligner comment c'est difficile d'avoir accès aux services en français dehors du Québec et c'est toujours un défi. On avait un événement, quelques événements à Sudbury pour montrer notre engagement pour sauver l'Université Laurentienne. Et l'importance de cette université, c'est parce que c'est une université clé pour les Franco-ontariens en général, mais les Franco-Canadiens aussi. C'est une institution qui livre les services en français pour les francophones. On appuie aussi l'Université Sudbury, qui est une institution publique qui veut bâtir un programme pour et par les francophones. Mais aussi, on sait qu'à travers les pays, un enjeu qui est primordial, c'est le fait qu'on doit moderniser la loi sur les langues officielles. C'est aussi quelque chose qu'on veut faire et c'est quelque chose qu'on peut faire, mais on doit voter pour un parti qui s'engage pour réaliser ces modernisations.
Erin O'Toole a écrit à François Legault au sujet de ce qu'il propose aux Québécois. On y apprend notamment qu'effectivement, l'entente pour les garderies ne tiendrait plus et qu'il y aurait des négociations avec Québec. Lors du débat en anglais, vous avez dit que vous trouviez excellente l'idée d'avoir un programme national comme proposent les libéraux avec les garderies, mais que malheureusement, on est allé en élection. Vous, on ne vous a pas beaucoup entendu sur ces 6 milliards, sur ces ententes avec les garderies. Qu'est-ce que vous feriez comme premier ministre avec le Québec à ce sujet-là?
Je garde l'entente. C'est une bonne entente. Ça reconnaît les gestes audacieux et inspirants du Québec. Le fait qu'on a un système de garderie qui était avant-gardiste et toujours avant-gardiste. Donc, ce qu'on veut faire, c'est de mieux investir dans les services de garde. Au Québec, on a aussi des enjeux où les gens ne peuvent pas trouver des espaces dans le système de garderie à cause du manque de financement. Donc, c'est un bon programme. On doit investir. Mais j'ai un élément que je ne suis pas d'accord. C'était nous, les néo-démocrates, qui ont toujours été là pour forcer ou pour avancer le système de garderie. En 2015, on a proposé cette idée. C'était toujours une partie de notre mouvement. C'est quelque chose qu'on croit profondément, c'est important. Pour les femmes en particulier, pendant cette pandémie, ils ont vécu un réel impact. Ils étaient frappés le plus fort. Et pour les aider, c'est essentiel d'avoir accès au système de garde. Donc, on veut mettre en œuvre un programme à travers les pays en travaillant avec les provinces et territoires.
Next question, Olivia Stefanovich, CBC News.
Good morning, Mr. Singh. As part of your announcement today, your party is highlighting that you would reverse the CRTC decision on wholesale internet rates. And I'm wondering, how exactly would you do this? Because the CRTC is an arm's length commission. What is your plan?
So the CRTC obviously is the regulator, but we can put in place laws that indicate where we want to go with things in terms of what our priorities are. And we want to make sure that our goal is to make sure internet is affordable, to make sure cell phone fees are affordable. And with rulings that have made it less affordable, we want to do whatever it takes to put in place the right steps. We want to make sure that we're putting in decisions that will actually save costs for families and for people in our country. And so we would put in place the right laws to protect Canadians, make it more affordable, lower the costs.
Yesterday, you advocated for clean drinking water in Nishnandiga First Nation, but you also support the Line 5 project, which would affect drinking water in Wikwemekong First Nation in Manitoulin Island. So how does that make any sense? How can you advocate for clean drinking water in one Indigenous community, but not another?
We want clean drinking water everywhere in Canada. We've got boil water advisories in over 30 communities in Indigenous communities across Canada. These are communities that still do not have access to clean drinking water. And so our plan is to make sure that no community in our country is faced with boil water advisories. We want to make sure every community has access to clean drinking water. This is a responsibility of the federal government. Mr. Trudeau promised to make it happen 6 years ago, and he broke that commitment. He walked away from that commitment. I don't believe anyone buys the excuse that in a country as rich as ours, as wealthy as ours, with the resources that we have, that we can ensure that everyone in our country has clean drinking water. That's our commitment. We're going to make sure it happens.
You stop the Line 5 project.
There are projects that, like Line 5, that we think can work with the environment if we make sure they follow the proper environmental regulations. But what we want to make sure is clear is that there are communities in our country that still don't have access to clean drinking water. We were in Niskandiga yesterday to highlight the plight of people. You know, Mr. Trudeau was asked a question about this and kind of made it seem like issues around clean drinking water and reconciliation weren't important. I want to make it really clear. They are important. Canadians believe they're important, and we believe it's important. And that's why we're fighting to make sure every community in our country has clean drinking water. This is a human right. This is something that everyone should have.
Next question, Menaka Raman-Wilms from the Globe and Mail.
Hello, Mr. Singh.
Hey there.
Later today, we'll be in Kitchener, where Liberal candidate Raj Sani recently stood down after allegations of harassment. Do you think this presents an opening for your NDP candidate in the riding, Bizan Zubi? And can you speak to why she would be good for Kitchener?
Bizan Zubi is shown to be a really powerful voice and an activist who's been raising concerns in the community, and I think she would make a great addition to the team. So I'm really excited that we'll be visiting. I just want to point out we want to win everywhere in Canada. We want folks to know that they have a real alternative. They do not have to be stuck with Liberals or Conservatives who on a number of occasions have shown really clearly that they are not on your side. They voted against our measures to make the telecom companies start lowering their costs. They voted against our initiative to make sure that the billionaires paid their fair share. They teamed up together to vote against pharmacare. They teamed up together to vote against getting rid of profit in long-term care. Both of them will cost you and your families when it comes to taking on the super rich. We have been very clear from the beginning. We are the only party committed to taking on the billionaires and the millionaires and the super powerful. We want to make sure that people are supported. We want to make sure that working people are supported. We want to make sure that the middle class are supported. We're committed to making that happen. And we want Canadians to know that they have a choice. The people of Kitchener and Waterloo have a choice. They can vote for New Democrats if they want any of the things that we talked about. They can make it happen, but you got to vote.
And today we're talking about the cost of internet, but of course another part of it that's really difficult throughout Canada is access to internet, especially in remote regions.
Yeah.
And this will take time and quite a bit of money to build out. So with your plan, can you explain a little bit about how long this would take and how soon can people be expected to be connected to high-speed internet?
I really appreciate the question. One of the proposals that we put forward is looking at putting in place a publicly owned Crown corporation to invest in the infrastructure necessary to connect communities that don't have access to the internet. We know that right now that is a vital infrastructure piece. When we look at roads and bridges, we know we need them to connect with one another. Right now, to connect, to work, to get education, to access services, the internet is vital. And people should not be limited in their access. We want to make sure everyone has the ability to access this. And we know right now there is a very big digital divide. If you live in the right community with the right access to the internet, you can work from home, your kids can go to school, you can access services, and it's a lot easier. But if you don't live in the right community, if you don't have access to the internet, it means that you are left out. And that digital divide has made it really hard for a lot of people. So we want to fix that. We absolutely want to commit significant resources to building the infrastructure so that everyone can access the internet. High-speed internet should be accessible to all.
Next question, Reza Patel, the Toronto Star.
Your candidate in Toronto, St. Paul's, has apologized for inventing and spreading a conspiracy theory linking Israel to missing COVID-19 vaccine doses in the United States. Prominent Jewish human rights groups, the Jewish community, have called the remarks anti-Semitic. Have you discussed this with the candidate, and what do you make of the remarks?
The candidate offered a complete and unequivocal apology. That apology was accepted recently by CIJA, and that was the right thing to do. Those comments were wrong, and I'm encouraged to see a clear apology and a complete withdrawal of those comments.
We recently saw that the Conservative Party ousted a candidate who was accused of making Islamophobic remarks on social media. given that other members of the Jewish community are still calling for her to step aside, why are you standing by this candidate, given that they still believe that?
I can tell you my values and what I expect everyone on my team to believe. There is no place in my party for discrimination, for racism, for xenophobia, for hatred against anyone based on who they are. And we know that there are particularly really dangerous trends with an increase in anti-Semitism and Islamophobia and hate against people for who they are, hate against anti-Black racism as well as anti-Indigenous. So we want to make sure folks know when you vote for New Democrats, you're going to get a leader who believes in this, and I expect every one of my candidates to believe in this as well.
Next question, Kelly Malone from the Canadian Press.
Good morning. So yesterday you spoke about protesters at hospitals saying that you would look into harsher penalties for people who are protesting hospitals. Do you believe that harsher penalties would deter protesters? And do you think that harsher sentences deter crime in other areas?
I wanted to be really clear around healthcare workers, and in particular in this pandemic, and what they've gone through, and how serious this pandemic has been for them. Healthcare workers are burnt out. Healthcare workers are leaving their profession because of how much they have sacrificed. It's been really tough for them. I can only imagine what it's like for someone who's worked so hard in this pandemic to save the lives of people, only to be faced with threats of violence, to be faced with aggression. It is completely wrong. There is no place for that. And then let's think about someone who's trying to get care. Like very recently, my dad needed to get care in a hospital. And the thought of him being prohibited or being precluded or being stopped in any way to get access to his care, that's just so wrong. So what we want to do is make a clear message. There is no place in Canada for anyone to stop a healthcare worker from getting to work, and there is no place in this country for any patient to be stopped getting their cancer treatment, to be getting their life-saving treatment. There is no place for that in our country, and so I wanted to make that really clear.
And the head of the BC Assembly of First Nations is raising concerns that all major federal party leaders around their commitment to reconciliation after none, including yourself, took up an offer to address chiefs in a video for their annual general meeting this week. They say there was time and flexibility, and it shows that Indigenous concerns are just lip service. So why not meet the Assembly of BC chiefs or send them a video?
That was a mistake, and I take responsibility. That should have happened, and I apologize directly to the chief, Grand Chief. My apologies, and I'm going to make sure we get this right. That should never have happened.
Next question, Mackenzie Gray from CTV News.
Good morning, Mr. Singh. I'd like to ask you about the Trans Mountain Pipeline.
Yeah.
You've said before that you're not sure what you'd do if you were elected Prime Minister. You're telling us every day you're running to be Prime Minister. I just want to put one thing on the table. If you were elected, would you be willing to pull the permit for TMX and just kill the pipeline straight up?
I've been opposed to the project, and I've always been opposed to it, and I remain opposed to it.
So if you were Prime Minister, would you sell the pipeline? You'd just end it and deal with it like that?
I am opposed to the project. Once I'm in office, we'll take a look at how far Mr. Trudeau has taken the project, and we'll make an assessment that's in the best interest of Canadians.
Next question, we'll go to Zoom with Hannah Daly from The Wire.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay, great. So you mentioned some regulatory decisions earlier.
You know what? I might have overspoken. I can hear a voice, but I can't really hear what you're saying.
Okay, fair enough.
Oh, there it is. Yeah, it's good. It's clear now. Go for it.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you mentioned regulatory decisions earlier, like the wholesale rates decision. I'm curious as well, more specifically about the CRTC's MVNO decision, the one on mobile virtual network operators. And we've heard from people that also has an effect on affordability. So I'm wondering if you have any specific plans for that, or if you thought about forcing that back to the table or something else.
I heard that you're asking a question around the CRT regulations and a decision, but I didn't hear what decision you're asking about.
The MVNO decision.
And what is that pertaining to?
the mobile virtual network operators, who can buy access to different networks.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah, that's actually something in our platform. We believe right now there is a monopoly. Well, we know it's not a belief, it's a fact. There's a monopoly. The big telecom communications run a monopoly. And as a result, we're paying some of the highest fees in the world for our internet and our cell phone. And so what we're proposing to do is to provide low-cost options to Canadians. And one of the ways to do that is the infrastructure that these big telecom companies have, right now, a low-cost alternative can't use it. We know that just making a change to allow for the low-cost operators to use the existing infrastructure would really open up a lot of low-cost options for Canadians. That's what we want to see happen. It's happened in the States, and it lowered the costs for people when it came to their cell phone and their internet services dramatically. We know this is achievable, and I want to point out, Mr. Trudeau promised to do something similar. He promised to lower the cost. He said he could do it by just asking the telecom companies nicely. That clearly did not happen and won't work. What it's going to take to lower the cost of cell phone and internet is to have the courage to mandate it, to put in place a price cap, to make sure that there are clear rules around a truly mandatory unlimited data plan. Those are things that we want to do, and we want to make sure that no lower cost options are available for Canadians, and that is what we'll achieve as well.
Perfect. And in your costed platform, there's several million earmarked for rural internet. Is that for the establishment of the Crown Corporation you were mentioning, or is that for something else?
We believe that in rural communities where in the past, as we've seen with other scenarios when it comes to telecommunication, for-profit operators don't have an interest in setting up infrastructure in communities where they can't make money. We know that rural communities, remote communities need access. It's vital. And so one of the solutions is for us to be able to build that using a publicly owned corporation is something that I'm proposing in our platform. That's something we can look at. At the end of the day, we need to make those investments. We need to make sure everyone in our country can access the internet, and that's our plan to achieve it.
This concludes our press conference. Thank you, merci.
Thanks so much. Merci.